What's up guys, today I'm going to talk about something that's been hitting the news in the past couple of weeks. It's a really big, really interesting news piece in that Batgirl, an upcoming film by Warner Brothers and HBO Max, has been cancelled out of nowhere, even though it was nearly finished. So, big news, really shocking, really surprising, kind of came out of nowhere in a way. Let's talk about it. So, in America, you've got this streaming service called HBO Max. It's one of the big streaming services. Run by Warner Brothers, got all the Warner Brothers content on there, got HBO content on there, really big budget, high quality stuff on that service. And it's considered one of the best streaming services as well in America. Here in the UK, we don't have it yet. It's because of certain deals that are in place. It's not going to be here till at least 2025. And that's an whole other argument that we'll get to at another point. HBO Max is now going through a certain transition period, let's say, in that Warner Brothers itself is going through a transition period, in that it used to just be Warner Brothers, but now it's recently merged with another company called Discovery. So it's now Warner Brothers Discovery, because that's how that works. It's now got new leadership. David Zaslav, I believe it's called. Not sure about the first name. Definitely called Zaslav though. I'm just going to call him Dave Zaslav from now on, but if it's wrong, who cares? Don't really like the bloke. Anyway, David Zaslav's running things and he's making some changes. The changes, particularly focusing on HBO Max and the theatrical side of stuff, is that one, HBO Max is no longer going to be the home to movies anymore. At least not brand new, original movies. Instead, they're going to focus on releasing movies theatrically, in the cinemas. Okay, that's fine. On the surface. We'll dig into that a bit more later. Another thing is that he's kind of wanting to start with a clean slate, which means he is looking at what's planned for the future and he's saying, right, let's put that at the side, or let's shelve it, let's forget about it, let's start from scratch. Again, on the surface, sounds like a smart idea in certain regards. New guy wants to have a really good head start on everything, understand what's going on. It kind of makes sense. Other things though is that he's cutting costs across the board. Because at the end of the day, he now owns two companies. He's got a bigger spending field of things or whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. He's got to spend a lot more money now. He's got a lot more employees. So that means he's cut costs across the board. He's cancelled certain shows and films and projects, and 70% of HBO Max's staff has also been cut, last I heard. Don't know how accurate that is, but it's a real shame. 70% of people have just suddenly lost their job. And people from Discovery Plus are now merging with HBO Max. The two streaming services are now one in America, or they're becoming one. So yeah, really shame that a lot of people are losing their jobs because of this. Because you would think this would be a really cool thing for them. So yeah, very disappointing there. Anyway though, Batgirl. Batgirl was one of the films that was in production. Going to come out in early next year, I believe it was. I think it was originally this year, but got pushed, I think. But anyway, Batgirl was intended to be a HBO Max original film. A film that was released just for HBO Max. You might have been able to rent and buy it in other places, but unlikely. It was going to be HBO Max exclusive. It was going to be a smaller scale DCEU product. So part of the larger DCEU, only with a smaller budget, smaller scale and scope. And it sounded really cool, starring Leslie Grace as the titular Batgirl. You've got Michael Keaton returning as Batman. That's a pretty big deal. He's returning in another film as well, which is a whole other problem that we'll get into another time. But anyway, Brendan Fraser in there as well as Firefly. It had a really killer cast. The directors were the guys who done Bad Boys for Life, which was a decent action movie. They also worked on Miss Marvel, which was pretty good. So yeah, a lot of great talent involved with this movie. And apparently it was 6 weeks away from being finished, which is really shocking. Just 6 weeks away. They'd filmed all of the film. It was in post-production. They were basically working on scoring it and editing it and working on the visual effects and so on. And apparently the test screenings, which every film has, by the way, every film once it's made and once it's in post-production gets these test screenings, so they get some idea of how well it's going to be in terms of critical reception and maybe how well it's going to be in terms of commercial reception. And Batgirl apparently was really, really bad. Now, who knows how bad it actually was. I will say this, it probably couldn't have been as bad as some of the recent superhero movies we've been getting outside of the Marvelverse. Morbius, Venom, the original Suicide Squad. It can't be as bad as that, surely. I mean, no matter how bad this film was, there are worse films out there. There has to be. But anyway, it didn't score well in these test screenings, but new insider information came out and apparently it scored equally as well as the upcoming Black Adam. So how's Black Adam getting released and Batgirl Got Cancelled? Well, Black Adam was further along. Black Adam stars Dwayne Johnson, a much bigger name, the biggest name in Hollywood arguably. So yeah, chances are it was too late to do anything about Black Adam, and that's why that's getting released and why Batgirl isn't. But also, Batgirl was costing them a lot of money. It was a small scale product, or it was meant to be, and yet as of recording, the rumour is that it was costing about 90 million. You look at certain sources, some say it was 70 million, some say it was 100 million. The figure I got is 90 million, that's how much they'd spent on it so far, and it wasn't even finished yet. So 90 million for a superhero movie is actually on the smaller side, but it's still a lot of money for a streaming exclusive movie. So it was costing them a lot of money, and it wasn't done yet. By the time they finish the visual effects, by the time they go in and reshoot it to try and make it better than what it originally was, by the time they go in and do all the marketing and promotion, you're probably talking another 30 million on top of that at least. So it was going to cost them a lot of money. It was going to end up being a big budget streaming exclusive, which is not what they wanted it to be. And again, David Zaslav, his whole approach now is HBO Max is for TV and exclusive stuff. Movies go to theaters. So Batgirl, too big to fit into his vision for HBO Max, too small to be released in cinemas. Also, not very good apparently, according to him and a few other people behind the scenes. Who those people are, I don't know, but chances are they're not film viewers, they are probably more business people rather than cinema experts, I imagine. Could be wrong though. So, it got cancelled. They put it on the shelf, said it wasn't good enough, it was costing them too much money, and they're not going to release it at all, which is incredibly disappointing. Not only as for a selfish reason, because I really want to see this film, it sounds cool, it sounds interesting, but also because all the people who worked on this film, suddenly their work will never get seen. Why never? Well, we'll get into that. David Zaslav has found a way around this release. He's not just throwing 90 million away. Instead, he's going to do a tax write-off in where he's basically saying this product that we made is a loss. So he's putting that down on the tax records as a loss, which means that instead of losing 90 million on the film, he'll actually get some money back and he'll only lose 65 million. So business sense and financial sense, I'm not a financial whiz kid, but I'd much rather lose 65 million than 90 million. So it makes sense in that regard. But what this means is that because it's going down officially in tax records, which as of recording, I don't think this actually happened yet. This is just what they're saying is going to happen. So there's still fingers crossed a chance that it doesn't happen. But if it does happen, if it does get a tax write-off, it means legally Batgirl will never see the light of day. They will not be able to release it on HBO Max, they will not be able to release it in cinemas. They won't be able to monetize this film. The only way this film will ever see the light of day is one, if it somehow gets leaked online or something, or two, if they, for whatever reason, release it absolutely free of charge, which is not going to happen, let's face it. All of this seems to be fueled by money and finance, so they're not going to release it for free. And then leaking it online, I don't necessarily condone that, and I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. So, especially since it's unfinished. So yeah, I don't see either of those options happening, which means Batgirl won't ever be released. Really disappointing. Because again, cool idea, interesting film, brilliant cast and characters, and all the crew working on this was really good credentials. All their work just thrown out, won't be seen. Very disappointing. And just to clarify, They're saying that if they released it on streaming services, it wouldn't make the money that they want. This would not be a financial success. And they're kind of right, especially the cost of this movie. You're talking 100+ million by the time it's done. Look at some of the other releases, particularly on HBO Max. Zack Snyder's Justice League, probably the biggest release for HBO Max, didn't really move the needle at all. It didn't bring in new subscribers, new viewers. It didn't make them a huge deal of money. So they released that film purely for the fans, and they kind of got nothing out of it. So if that film, a much bigger budget, a much bigger attention span film, let's say, much bigger interest in that film, didn't move the needle, then Batgirl's not going to either. And in terms of the theatrical release, would it have made its money? This is where the argument gets really interesting, because arguably, yeah, it could have. I think if they'd done it now, if they actually went in and finished it after this news, after all this came out, yeah, I think this would have made the money. I think people are now more interested in this film than ever because they want to see how bad could it have been. Is it bad at all? And I think for that reason, more people would have went to the cinemas, more people would have paid money to see it, and that could have really benefited Batgirl. And maybe that is what they're going for. Maybe this is just a whole marketing ploy. Again, they haven't officially went in and done the tax write-off yet, as far as I'm aware. So it's entirely possible that in the next week or two, they could just change their mind and say, you know what, we'll finish it, we'll release it. People are clearly more interested in it than we thought. I doubt that's going to happen, if I'm honest, but it's possible. There's a small chance of it. And ultimately what this means is that Batgirl is now one of the most expensive, most produced films ever made to not get released. There are other examples. I've talked about Justice League, Zack Snyder's version of it, for example, but that's a bit different because they did actually make that film, just they brought in a different director. So there are examples out there of films that were made and never saw the light of day. But in most instances, we don't even know anything about these films. They're usually smaller scale films, they're usually more indie films, let's say, and they're usually stopped before they ever reach the stage of production. So hundreds of films a year probably get made that we don't see or know about, or probably go through some stage of development and we don't see or know about. And Batgirl is a rare big example of a much bigger budget and much bigger appeal and audience interest film just being cut. So it's a unique in that regard. And here's the thing, they've came out and said that they love Leslie Grace, they love her performance in the film, and they'd be open to having her return as Batgirl in the future. Why would she want to do that now? Why would Leslie Grace want to return as Batgirl in the future? Why would anyone want to return to working for Warner Brothers having worked on this movie? Michael Keaton, it's took like what, 30 years for him to return as Batman, and one of his films is now mired in controversy because of Ezra Miller, and that's a whole other argument, and there's discussions that that film might not get released. And now this film is being completely canned. He's being recast in Aquaman. He was meant to make an appearance in that, but now Ben Affleck's came in and replaced him in that. Why would Michael Keaton ever want to return as Batman now? It just doesn't make sense. He's surely going to be really pissed off about all this. He's put in all the work and effort. He's came in, he's put on the suit again, a role that he never thought he would do again, and they've just basically scrapped everything. The only hope now for Michael Keaton is The Flash, if they still plan on releasing that movie, which, again, a whole other discussion. There's a possibility that they don't release that movie. But same thing with Leslie Grace. Why would she want to work for Warner Brothers again as this character? If they bring her in, they're not going to just redo another Batgirl movie with her. If they bring her back, she'll be in a much smaller role, she'll be in a supporting role. And that could be cool, that could be interesting, and I would like to see that. But why would she want to go from being the star of her own movie to being a supporting role in another movie for a company that clearly didn't have faith in her or her movie? It doesn't make sense. Why would any of the directors, the cast and crew who worked on Batgirl ever want to work with Warner Brothers again? Why would anyone who's on the outside looking in want to work with Warner Brothers now, knowing that at any point they could just scrap your film and say, right, we'll do a tax write-off, get some of our money back? Yeah. It might make sense on a financial level, but on a creativity level, on a collaboration level, it's just bullshit. It does not work, and it's making them a very antagonistic entity in the film and entertainment world right now. Nobody would want to go near them with a pitchfork, let alone work with them, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, I imagine everyone who worked on this are still getting compensated. They are still getting paid for it, depending on what their contracts are. Some of them probably had percentage-wise in terms of how much the film grossed in terms on their contract. That's probably gone, if that is what was in their contract. If, for example, Leslie Grace got 10% of the film's gross earnings on her contract, well, guess what? She's not getting that anymore because they're not releasing it. But she probably did get a flat fee of some sort. So yeah, I imagine everyone is getting paid. They are getting compensated for the work they have done, and they will be able to put it on their CVs and resumes and filmography and so on. But no one will ever see what that is. No one, if they're going into another job and saying, "Oh, we directed Batgirl, right? Let us see what you've done on it." Well, oh, we can't. Well, that's a shame then. But what this also does is it opens up some of the bigger issues with streaming services themselves, in that streaming services release exclusive content for their services. That's great, it brings people in. Netflix, for example, they created The Witcher. If you want to watch The Witcher, you've got to go on to Netflix, you've got to subscribe to Netflix. Hasn't been released anywhere else, it's not on DVD, not on Blu-ray, you can't buy it digitally. Which means that, hey, if Netflix suddenly goes out of business, The Witcher's gone. Yeah, that could be your favourite TV show of all time. But if the Netflix goes down, The Witcher goes with it. Unless they end up selling that content off to someone else who then distributes it, or they release it on home video. So it's possible, but it opens up a whole new can of worms and problems. And it's not just Netflix I'm talking about, it's Disney Plus, it's Hulu, it's Amazon Prime. All of this exclusive content is stuck on their platforms unless they release it in another form. So HBO Max, it wasn't just Batgirl that they got rid of. There are certain films on that service, like 6 films I think it was, including one with Seth Rogen and a pickle, and one with, what was it? What was the other film that I'm talking about right now? It was The Witches with Anne Hathaway. Exclusive films for HBO Max. They've just got rid of them. They're not on HBO Max anymore. Now, here in the UK, you can rent them and you can buy them. I don't think you can get them on DVD and Blu-ray, but I could be wrong on that one. In America, I don't know about that state of things, but these were made for HBO Max. They were exclusive to that streaming service. So, assuming you can't rent or buy them now, those films have just gone. And then, again, this is a huge problem for the future of streaming. Streaming services are the big thing right now. There's a lot of them. There's going to continue being a lot of them. In 10 years' time, the streaming services out will not be the same ones that we have now. I guarantee you that. Some of them will be gone, some of them will have been morphed into other things, some of them will be merged and whatnot, and yeah, the streaming services 10 years time will not be the ones that we have now. And this is just eye-opening that streaming services just aren't a secure form of releasing your content. Unless you are very successful like Netflix, which, assuming Netflix is going to be around forever, then all of that exclusive content's safe. But if it's not, you're in trouble. Which makes you wonder, why should I subscribe to Netflix if one day Netflix just isn't going to be there? Why should I fall in love with these TV shows, these films, if one day I might not even be able to watch them again? It's a real shame and it's a real worrisome thing, especially in terms of archiving this content and being able to possess and watch this content. It's also worth saying that the whole HBO Max DC property things, Zaslav is looking for a producer to overlook all of the future DC films. So he wants a clean slate. That's fine, it's great. But it does mean that he's cancelled Batgirl, he's cancelling a few other things, he's changing certain plans, and apparently they've now got a 10-year plan in place for future DC movies and TV shows. And they're wanting someone like Kevin Feige on the Marvel side of things to guide this 10-year plan and to put it into effect. That's great. A little late, but it's great. It's what they should have done like 10 years ago. But the problem is, what happens if, say, film A, just a random film that I'm coming up with, what happens if they want a film released in 2025? Comes to 2025, they get a test screen and that and say, ooh, that film's not very good. Alright, we'll not release it. What if this is just the start? What if they decide to just keep making these films, keep putting them aside and do a tax write-off to get some of their money back? Well, it makes them a pretty shitty company to work for. Again, people will not want to work for Warner Bros. Discovery after this has happened. And especially if it continues to happen. And with other properties like The Witches and all these other films being removed from the service, it's just increasing the level of dislike for this streaming service. And at the end of the day, what this all is being summed up is that David Zaslav, the new owners of HBO Max and Warner Bros. Discovery, they're not filmmakers, they're not artists, they're not in here for the creativity, they're not trying to release the best films ever made or anything like that. They're in it for the money. This is a business, they're businessmen. They run these big corporations, these big companies, they want to make money. That's it at the end of the day. All these decisions are about money to some extent. And that's just a solid realization that, hey, that's what Hollywood is at the end of the day. It's fueled by money, it's fueled by finance, not by artistry, not by creativity. And just to bring this all to an end, clearly I'm not happy about it. I would have liked to see Batgirl. Selfishly, I think it would have been a really cool, interesting film, like I've already said. Will we ever see Batgirl? I don't think so. I did say there's a possibility that this could be some sort of marketing ploy, that they are just trying to gauge interest in the audience and build up some sort of furor in the audience to try and make them want to see it more. That could work, that could be a thing, but I don't think it is. So, at the end of the day, Batgirl has been cancelled. Other films have been cancelled, other films have been removed. It's very disappointing, it's very upsetting, it's very angering in certain ways. And it's not a good look for that company, it's very worrisome for the future, not just for HBO Max, not just for Warner Bros. Discovery, but for other streaming services and other big companies and platforms like this. What if other companies look at this as an example and say, hey, we put a lot of money into our products, they're not going to perform well, let's do what they did. It could happen. And it's very worrisome and it's very bleak look at the future. Will we ever see Batgirl? I don't think so.